Welcome to Veco by Eurolink. In this tutorial, I'm going to explain how you can analyze the data within Veco and how you can represent that data graphically. I'll be showing two examples of this. The first example will be to summarize the number of new tenancies over a period of time. And later in this tutorial, I will show how fee levels can be represented graphically. So to start, we're going to look at new tenancies. Within Veco, we have a tenancies grid, and by default the tenancies grid will show all active tenancies as well as those tenancies which may be under negotiation. But for the example of summarizing the number of tenancies over a period of time, we're not only going to need to see the active tenancies, we also need to see the old tenancies or the archived tenancies. So we're going to first update this grid to include the archived tenancies. And to do that, we go to Find and then select, as well as active, we're selecting archived. Now we can see on this grid that not only are we seeing the active tenancies, but we're also seeing a lot of the old archived tenancies. Down at the bottom of the screen we can see how many there are in total, 1,641. We're now going to show this information as a summary. And to do that, we have a function within Veco that we call pivot grids. This is very similar to the pivot tables function within Excel. And what we're going to do is we're going to summarize our information into columns and rows. First, we're going to count up how many items or how many records or how many tenancies we have in our grid. And to do this, we're going to choose one of these fields. In fact, I'm going to choose the reference field, and I'm going to drop that into where it says drop data items. And you can see that it says 0. Okay, the reason it says 0 is we haven't yet told this function whether we're counting, whether we're summarizing, whether we're doing any sort of calculation with the field. But in this case I just want to see how many. So I go to the top of the screen here, refresh the field list, choose reference, and then tell Veco that we actually don't want to see the summary or the average, we want to see the count, how many items there are. And we can now see that the figure changes to 1,641. Now we're going to break this down into months of the year. Within Veco, the occupied date is the date when the tenancy has started. So we're going to go to the date fields, select occupied date, and from the occupied date, which of course could be any day of any month of any year, we're going to extract just the month and create a new field that we can use. We're also going to select the year and create a new field. Now we're going to take the month that the tenancies were occupied or started and drag that field into where it says drop column fields here. And we can now see that our 1,641 records have been analysed across months of the year. Let's now see how we can represent those figures on a chart. We click on the box that says Chart, and we can now see that, as a rule, most of our new tenancies started in August, September and October. But of course, these months represent any month across any year. So let's now see how we can break this down into years. If we go back to our summary grid, now we're going to look at the occupied date, but just taking the year so the year when a tenancy started. And we're going to filter this so that we're only seeing certain years. And we're going to take this field and we're going to break down these figures across those years. So we can now see the figures for 2015, 16 and 17. Okay, so now we can see how that appears on a chart. Click on the chart button. And now we can see how many new tenancies were entered onto Veco across the years 2015, 2016 and 2017. We also have the option of showing these charts or these graphs in a slightly different format. If I go to chart type, the top of the screen, at the moment we can see we're showing a bar chart. If I change this to stacked bar, we can see the same months, but now the years are represented by these different columns. Okay, so now let's move on to our second example, which is to analyse our fees. We're going to close the chart down. And for this, we're going to go into one of our accounts reports that we call Transactions by Nominal. The Transactions by Nominal grid allows us to see all of the accounting transactions across a period of time. So for this example, I'm also going to choose 3 years, and I'm also going to select just the fees. So firstly, I'm going to go to the date range at the top and select the dates that I'm interested in. And I'm going to fetch the data. Now we can see on this grid that we have all accounting transactions from the 1st of January 2015 through to the end of 2017. But in this example, I'm only interested in looking at fees. So I'm going to filter this grid to just show me items that are for our fees, so fees transactions. So I'm going to go to account name, click on the little filtering option, and I'm only going to select my letting fees and management fees. So now the grid is only showing letting fees and management fees. We can see the credit amounts and the debit amounts, which would be any invoices and credit notes. Now we're going to use the same option to analyse this across months, years, and also see the information graphically. So we go to Pivot Grid, and we're going to take the balance, which is the difference between the debits and the credits, and we're going to represent that as a total within the box there. So this represents that for those 3 years, these are all the letting fees and management fees that we've collected. We're now going to do the same sort of thing. We're going to analyse this across months and years. And to do that, we're going to break down the date of the transaction and extract just the month and the year. And we've now created 2 new fields that we can select from: the month of the transaction and the year of the transaction. Okay, so let's take the month and drag that to where it says drop column fields here. And we can now see that the total has been broken down to the different months. How does that look on a chart? Go down and click on Chart, and we can see that as a rule most of our fees are collected over the months of June and July. But these are total fees. Let's now see how we can analyse these fees so that we can see the difference between the value of the letting fees and the value of the management fees. So if I go back to my grid summary, and if I now click on account name and drag this field to where it says drop fields or drop row fields here. And we've now analysed the fees still across the months, but now broken down into letting fees and management fees. How does this look on a chart? Okay, so we can now see the different levels of management fee and letting fee across months of the year. And now let's go one stage further and let's pick a couple of corresponding years and see how we can break these figures down even further. Go back to the grid. This time we're going to choose the year when the fee was raised, or the year of the transaction, and we're going to drop that alongside where it says account. So what the system has now done is to take our different types of fee and to separate them out across, in this case, the 3 different years. How does this look graphically? Click on Chart. And we can now see the different levels of fees across the different years. Now, sometimes it's easier to see these charts not as bar charts, but as lines. And one of the things that we can do, again, with our chart type is to see the information as what is called a special line or spline. And we can now see the different trends in our letting fees, which are the lower charts, and the management fees. The different coloured lines represent the different years, but still across the different months of the year. And that ends the tutorial.